says something went wrong, you know? And when I was talking to Bonnie, I said it's kind of like it's a little bit like a false positive, right? Something went wrong, like check engine. What's wrong with the engine? No way of possibly knowing.
It might
Um,
be AI generated code behind the scenes.
it could be, probably. We're using Riverside to run this. If Riverside, if you're running on AI generated code, maybe you should look at into Endor Labs. Um, so we welcome to another Friday live stream. I have Andrew from the product marketing team joining us, and we have our janitor Varun joining us as well. So, Varun, you just went on the road. You had a worldwide trip. You went to Europe. You went on the road to meet customers here in the U.S. And the main thing, like the title that we put on this live stream is "Will AI Eat AppSec?" But more specifically, I'd love to just get like a vibe check from you. What are people saying? Are companies actually mandating adoption of AI? Are people really using this stuff? Give us a bit of a landscape.
Yeah, I'll summarize it in three words. There's excitement, yet there's confusion and chaos. So here's the net of it. Every CEO on the planet, crazy people like me, go to our teams and say, "Why aren't we using more AI? We just saw Satya post at Microsoft that they're writing 30% of the code with AI, and Sundar and Mark Zuckerberg are saying the same thing. And why aren't we doing it?" And so everybody scrambles to go figure out why aren't we doing it. And obviously, the one thing we have to keep in mind is, the companies that are stating these large numbers of what their code is produced by AI also have ulterior motive. They're also marketing and selling you the AI coding assistants that they want you to start using. So it's not to say that it's wrong or you don't want to use these tools, but I just think people need to slow down a little bit and be thoughtful. I think these tools are incredible for demos, for proof of concepts. I frankly think today, if my product team came to me with a PRD and didn't have some screens or a prototype, I'd be pretty disappointed. So that's the new expectation. But thinking about production, back end, scaled up, distributed systems being written by AI is a pretty scary thought, and I'm sure we'll get into why. But that's the state of what I've heard from both CTOs and security leaders. And I'd say even the CTOs that are rolling out these tools understand the shortcomings of these tools, but are under immense pressure to roll these out nevertheless.
So the pressure to roll these out, um, is that a board level mandate that you're seeing at some of these large companies in a fear to not be left behind?
I think it's just the fear. It's the FOMO, right? It's just, am I gonna miss out? Everybody else is gonna outpace me, out innovate me. Are we gonna be too slow to be competitive in this new market with everybody shipping with AI? Look, part of it is true, but let's also be honest. I was talking to an employee at one of the hottest AI companies yesterday, because we're all looking at them and saying, how are they moving so fast? How are they growing so fast? Frankly, they're just outworking everybody else. Like at this company, I won't name the company, they're working 7 days a week in office. Breakfast, lunches, and dinners are catered 7 days a week in office. So yes, there is, like all the other enterprises, need to be aware that there's is the base of this new world, and the companies that are coming out at you to disrupt your businesses. It's part technology, but it's also, frankly, everybody's just in overdrive and scramble mode.
Yeah. And if we dig a little bit deeper and zoom into the technologies themselves and in kind of in our world of um, AI generated code, um, are you, I mean, from your peers or even just the CISOs and executives that you talk to, um, are you seeing actual consequences to the rollout of AI generated code? Of, a company invested in, insert AI coding assistant here for $2 million, enabled every engineer to go towards them. Some people are saying this is actually wasting time for the senior engineers who now have to review a lot of AI generated code. Do you
Yeah.
think that we can approach some sort of standardization of how much more productive can this actually make us be?
That's a great question. And like, don't get me wrong, let me just state for the record, that I'm all for AI, and as you know, I've rolled out to every engineer in Endor Labs, Cursor. Um, Here's the thing that we're finding though. And in fact, I'll quote a CTO of a large fintech company in the UK who told me if I could have it my way, I would give every senior engineer in my company a coding assistant, but I would not do that for my junior engineers. So here's a problem that you were, I think, trying to get at, which is when people know what they're doing and they can supervise and it can be a co-pilot, not to be mistaken with autonomous coding, then you can really supercharge productivity by 30, 40, 50% for senior people that know what they're doing. When you give this to junior engineers, kind of your risk is kind of blind leading the blind. And so you've got all this massive amounts of code being generated by these coding assistants being overseen by people that don't know what they're doing. And now you end up with the seniors having to waste time to kind of go refactor that code, review it, give tons of comments. In fact, just this morning, I was reading a study where they did research with some of the most popular open source project maintainers, and they gave them all these modern coding assistants. Before they started the experiment, they asked and surveyed like how much productivity enhancement they think they would have. People pegged it at 24% was the average that people thought they would get in productivity gains. And guess what? At the end of the study, it turns out they were slower by 1%. Call it even, Steven. And so what happened here, right? You can write code much faster, but the maintainability, the scalability, the quality, the security of that code isn't at par. And then you fundamentally ask the question, like, what is AI going to get better at near term? And what are the things it can't near term get better at because of just how it's built? The thing that certainly it can't get better at over near term is security. And so why is that? Well, all of these coding assistants are trained on open source software. It's all unlabeled data. They have learned the good, they have learned the bad, they have learned the ugly. So how do I go undo that? And how do I go bring labeled data so now all of a sudden AI tools are generating secure code by default? It doesn't work that way. And so what a lot of studies are finding is if you use coding assistants with humans that know what they're doing and with the right context and guardrails, so example being for security, giving it the right context and identifying for the co-pilots when they're generating insecure code, giving them that feedback instantaneously, giving them direction on how to rewrite it, how to fix the vulnerability. They're capable of doing it if you give them the right context. That's essentially what the studies are showing. So fast forward, essentially the people that have studied this for a while in the enterprise and thinking about how to have the right rollout strategy, it's about have the people that actually are trained software engineers. It's very dangerous in the hands of vibe coders like you, Ron, if you're shipping production software. So I forbid you from ever shipping production software without, of course, all our guardrails. Then maybe we can have a conversation. But then you got to put the right, context. Now, one of the best ways to bring that context in is MCP servers, right? It gives you an ability to bring third-party context, the security expert into the coding assistant and the IDE, bringing in the quality controls in there, the architectural kind of oversight in there. And so I think MCP is a fantastic way to think about putting enterprise guardrails into your favorite coding assistant.
So MCP, obviously all the rage right now. And Andrew, maybe this is where you can provide us a little bit of overview. If we pause for a moment, you've done some work on this. Can you talk a little bit about what is and what is not an MCP server? Because I think we treat it as the technology, where I think about it more as it's like saying an open source package, right? That open source package can be good, can be bad, it can do all sorts of different things. So can you give us a brief overview?
Yeah, so just if you don't even know the term, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. I think the easiest way to think about it is just an interface. Developers today have different interfaces they use, whether that's the terminal, the CLI, or the IDE where they're actually coding. Those are just interfaces. And what an MCP server is an interface to another system. And so in the case of security, that means it's an interface to some type of security system that's going to be working with that developer and their agent to give that context that Varun was just talking about. So when you're thinking about MCP servers, what you're really thinking about is what am I giving in that backend to that agent to help it improve the code it's writing.
So this is additional context, additional data to, at the end of the day, the prompt that I'm giving the AI model, right?
To the prompt and to the agent itself. You can almost think of it as a tool. So kind of there's two parts. There's the server itself, and then the rules that you include in the repository. The rules can guide the agent how to work with that MCP server. So for example, you could say anytime that you import dependencies, you need to access my tools and scan them and check them to make sure you're not pulling in, outdated dependencies that might have vulnerabilities. Because there's, again, the big challenge with agents or LMMs in general is the training cutoff, right? So some of the, the foundational frontier models today were trained on data that's already a year old. And just, you can imagine the number of CVEs that we've identified in all that training data since then.
Yeah. There is a great webinar that we did with our CTO, Dimitri, a little while ago, where we essentially vibe coded an application. It wasn't my flavor of vibe coding, where I use tools like Lovable and V0 that beautifully abstract everything away from me, and I have no idea what's going on behind the hood. But we used Cursor. Obviously, we did something that I don't know if it will real world look just like that, but what we did is we gave Cursor a prompt. We did give it a little bit of guardrails, and then we saw how many CVEs and CWEs, and software weaknesses, we generated within 10 minutes. It was in the thousands. But that's not the interesting thing, because we covered that. We said that at the end of the day, if your AI is trained on vulnerable code, then it will learn the good with the bad. The interesting thing was that at some point we saw that it brought in about 1,400 dependencies. And then someone on the chat on that webinar said, try to tell it to redo that section of the app, but bring in less dependencies. And then it brought in 1,600 dependencies, right? So, and we couldn't figure it out, right? Like not much has fundamentally changed. We couldn't get the actual app to work, unlike my vibe coded projects. But I think that even there's a sense of security that you get by placing some guardrails in Cursor. It looks like Cursor rules, but at the end of the day, you do have to get that constant validation from it. And last thing, I mean, Varun, I'm interested to get your perspective on it, on this move. I'm seeing this term context engineering starting to pop up, and prompt engineering. This brand new term is already outdated, and I think it mostly talks about this, right, where you prompt the AI to do something specific, and you add context through something like an MCP server. And I've heard you talk about this idea of almost like pair programming with the AI. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you think about that?
Yeah, and I'll draw an analogy here, right? Because people fundamentally see these tech shifts happen, and the question becomes, well, isn't security just going to get baked into whatever platform? I saw this in 2015 when I was starting Redlock, and everybody said, well, cloud security will never be a category of its own. It'll be baked in by the cloud providers. And honestly, there was a shared responsibility model there. And I think the principles of shared responsibility extend from cloud to coding assistants. Coding assistants are incredible productivity boosters if people know what they're doing and with the right set of guardrails and the right set of context. And so similar model applies here. And I think, look, the context engineering is, and this is no indictment to any tool that is a coding assistant, they're all just trained on code on the internet, which has the good, the bad, the ugly. We can't as an industry change that. And it is impossible to go label all of that data correctly for these assistants to learn properly. So what is the best thing we can then do is experts like us at Endor Labs, who have invested in dozens of the smartest minds on the planet in security, come around and train security agents to specifically understand the security threats, understand the threat modeling landscape, understand both the known vulnerabilities, but also the classes of business logic and architectural flaws that commonly happen. And now what you do is you put this together, these two together, so the coding assistants that are incredible at writing code, security agents trained by folks like us that are incredibly smart at finding security issues, and then you pair them up together. And so why is that important? If you look at how traditional application security has worked, even if you think about as shift left as you used to be, you would scan in a pull request. Well, if you scan in a pull request and you find these issues, guess where they're getting routed? They're getting routed to the human to go respond to and fix. So all of a sudden, you were trying to create productivity improvements in your company, creating lots of code that gets reviewed down the road. Security issues get passed to the human. You just created another new choke point. So to me, fundamentally, security has to shift all the way to being a pair programmer to these assistants, guiding them as they're producing code on where they're making mistakes and how to fix it. So the end result is what is produced in the IDE is just secure by default. And unfortunately, you cannot get secure by default with just using coding assistants without using the security experts, in our case, the AI security experts. And I'll just add one other thing, Ron, which is I was having a conversation with the CISO yesterday. I think it is so critical now, more so than ever before, to start thinking about how you do security code reviews. Because your worry is not just the known vulnerabilities that we have been fixated about as an industry, the CWEs and the CVEs. Now it's just silly architectural and business logic flaws. You create an API endpoint, you forgot to add authentication and authorization on it. Things like that. But the question becomes, how many humans are you going to have in your company to do this stuff manually? And again, this is another great opportunity to train AI and security agents to do code reviews. And in fact, I did this math with the CISO yesterday. For a company with 300 engineers, just average doing one PR every working day, you're talking about 15 to 20,000 pull requests. You're talking about 75,000 pull requests. And even if you spend only about 15 minutes reviewing it as a human, that's 20,000 man hours in a year. Where are we going to find that capacity? It's impossible. And so we must create these kind of AI assistants for the AppSec team, because I think more so now than ever before, AppSec and product security is tremendously important.
Yeah, and that's also assuming that everyone on the application security teams knows how to read a PR and understand the ramifications of it. So realistically, probably not 15 minutes. Is this a tomorrow problem or is this a today problem?
Every company I am talking to right now is implementing AI coding assistants today, yesterday, tomorrow. So it is here, it is now. And what I tell our friends in application and product security teams, we have all held our programs together with Band-Aid and duct tape, right? We've had way too much volume of alerts already with human-generated code. We have somehow figured out how to have 10, 15, 20 people in the loop to do manual triage. And we still have very unhappy and annoyed development partners. The only way this works is if you retool AppSec with first principles, with secure by default prevention first strategy, and precision and accuracy and remediation. Do not be buying another tool that just finds you more problems. You need the whole life cycle of fixing and remediation, and I think this is a very much 2025 problem.
So you touched on the frustration on the engineering side and the kind of ever-growing friction between the ProdSec, AppSec, maybe even DevSecOps teams and engineering. That is something that we've been hearing from AppSec vendors for many, many years now. Do you think that this now is at a tipping point? Does it get worse? Does maybe even all of this get consolidated into the engineer, right? He has the developer has all these AI agents that can do the role of AppSec. What do you think that is the future of that feud?
The future is the pair programming construct that it describes. Future is secure by default. And I think that secure by default will still require a partnership between experts in engineering, both tools and humans, as well as experts in product and application security, again, both tools and humans. I think this is a shared responsibility. To your point, will AI just do this for us? Not without the context and the expertise. That context and the expertise typically does not live inside of the AI coding assistant companies. That lives in specialist security companies like us and others in the market. And essentially, if we can marry those technologies together, it would be a best of all worlds. And yes, the AI coding assistants are very capable given the right context and insights. to be able to write better code if you're giving them that continuous feedback where you're finding issues and helping them fix it. And so let's use that. That's the model of the future. The model of the future is co-pilots and coding assistants working with security agents to write better code from the onset.
So we're talking about a lot of really interesting forward-facing things here, right? We're talking about AI-generated code and MCP servers and all these things. If I am an airline or an insurance company, I have an app that it was written in Java 15 years ago that all of my customers use, that is not AI generated, that is not, it's not a Bazel monorepo, it's not this super cutting edge thing, but it is my moneymaker, right? It is the thing that every single one of my customers use to move money around, to check into flights, to do whatever it is that they need to do. And Andrew, I'm also interested in your perspective on this because you just worked on our C and C++ launch as well, which is famously not a very, new and cutting edge language. So how do we not get distracted with all this new stuff, with all of I can't even call it legacy because it's really not that old. We're talking about things that are 5 years old, 10 years old. Are we losing sight a little bit of a set of older problems that are just now being exacerbated? How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah. Happy to go first. Ron, you might have an answer yourself.
Yeah, go for it.
Just feedback. Cool. So I think these are two different programs. You have to run a program that is focused on minimizing security debt from entering your system, because once that debt enters your system, it is extremely hard to get it out of your system. And so I think everything we have talked about so far is how do you minimize more debt accumulating into your organization. Going back though to your point, there's still legacy. An average enterprise we talk to has 1 million to 3 million alerts from code scanning tools in their backlog, which in human years might take them 7 to 10 years to even parse through and go through and act on. So it is an impossible effort already looking at all the legacy core applications to fix it. So, our perspective on that is first and foremost, figure out precisely what is actionable. I can assure you that 90% plus of the things that are right now being tracked in your backlog for code scanning are actually false positives. You just haven't had enough human capacity to triage it. So one, cut through the noise, get the precise short list of issues. The second problem is empathize with your developers. They're not pushing back on you to fix that or upgrade a Spring library because they just want to be difficult. It's because those actions are actually truly hard to do. And most likely the developers you're asking to go fix these issues aren't the ones that introduced this code, so they don't fully have the confidence of understanding the context. And thirdly, they don't know what regression issues this will introduce into your check-in app that might take it down for 12 hours, which could be detrimental to your business. And so I think to us it's very simple. One, scan with precision, cut that noise down by 90-95%. Technologies like reachability analysis that we do or building a call graph of your application are very successful at doing that. The second piece then is find the right path for your developers on the fixes. So don't just leave them at the altar with here's a set of problems, but go run the analysis of what are the things that are going to be easy to fix, high confidence, it won't break your application. And then for things that are really difficult to do, like upgrades in Java Spring Boot, find the easy button. In our case, as an example, that easy button is an Endor patch. An Endor patch, for those of you that don't know what it is a backported fix to a legacy version of a library, essentially taking something that has been fixed in a new version that your engineers have a really hard time to upgrade to and bring it back. So yeah, to your point, not all is sexy and glorious and shiny and AI, but we got to be very pragmatic on how do we stop the bleeding on the new stuff and then go back and figure out a practical way to burn down our security debt.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the interesting opportunities with AI is to actually start addressing old problems with new technology. And I think, Ron, you touched on this briefly when you mentioned C and C++. These are, 40-year-old languages. A lot of times, are actually, they predate even the concept of a package manager. So there's no, centralized repository like npm or Maven where I can go find all of my dependencies. And then detecting things are hard because of the way developers in the past worked with these libraries, right? Copying code from one repo to another, or files and things like that. And so it's been this huge black box for SEA tools and AppSec teams for a long time. But the exciting part is with LMM technologies, there's also this concept of embeddings where we can actually, map some of these files to create a fingerprint and then look for that fingerprint in our code bases. And older technologies, not even that old, but like hashing, for example, only work if you get that exact fingerprint. But what if you get that, near fingerprint where there's just been a comment added, for example, to a file, or a date changed, or a function name was changed slightly because the developer was working with it? Well, that's what LMMs and embeddings open up for us. We can find those fingerprints, find those near matches, and actually increase our detection capabilities. So that's kind of one example of fixing that old problem of just like visibility and identification, and then mapping that to CVEs. I think the other one that we've talked a little bit about, and Varun touched on briefly, is just fixing is actually getting easier in some ways now than it ever was before, but it only if you have the right context for your agent and your developers. And that's where things like Endor Labs upgrade impact analysis can be a big benefit. Again, in the past, if you wanted to upgrade a dependency, it was a game of roulette. You wouldn't know if your code would break. You'd have to kind of try it. With upgrade impact analysis, we're giving you that safe upgrade pathway to the latest version and things like that. But with LMMs, you can hit that next step and actually just give it straight to the LMM and let it use that data to fix for you. So even what might have been a 15-minute exercise for you can be a 5-minute exercise. Give it the data, let it fix that, and kind of burn through some of that technical debt a lot faster than you could have in the past.
Yeah, Andrew always corrects me when I talk about finding vulnerabilities. That finding is in large part commoditized at this point, right? You can find the CVEs, and you can find CWEs, and you can find anything that could be potentially associated with your code that could potentially be a risk. There's the argument to be made that now we have a new set of risks that maybe are a little bit harder to find, that are more architectural. But at the end of the day, it becomes a game of, are you able to prioritize the risk that actually matters according to your risk profile? And then are you able to actually do something about it? Can you go beyond a PR comment that says, hey, if you upgrade, or if you completely make a fundamental change to your code base, then there you go. And then it's a little bit equivalent to an age-old sales and marketing problem, right? Where marketing could say, hey, someone downloaded this ebook. Hey, sales, why isn't that a customer yet? Right? They're not a customer because they're not the right fit. They're not really interested. So in much the same way, if you on the security side, you find a risk that is critical, but however, there's no path to remediate it, you're not able to show an actual solution on how to get that thing actually fixed, then that is where you get that backlog of things that stay there forever. What I am interested, just from your experience, Varun, because you also ran a large engineering team in the past with Dimitri, what do you say to organizations that just say we need to fix everything?
I say it's not practical. It's as simple as that. You just don't have enough capacity. You're either going to double your engineering headcount, or you're going to find ways to prioritize to the real risks that matter. And I don't think any company on the planet right now has budgets that allows them to expand their headcount to the level you would need and the capacity you would need to do it. So it's both the volume problem, Ron. It's also the SLAs now, right? More and more compliance standards are coming in, more and more aggressive SLAs. If you're a FedRAMP, certified organization, you have continuous monitoring. Criticals have to be fixed in 30 days. Well, not every critical is created equal. We forget that. We oversimplify the fact that, there might be an easy upgrade from a minor version to another, version in JavaScript, but it could be extremely complicated to go fix a Spring vulnerability in Java in 30 days. You just can't do it. So, I think the world is much more convoluted, and there's lots of shades of gray within.
Yeah, Do you think that realistically, the advances in AI that we have been talking about, do you see that materially impacting the lives of application security engineers in terms of headcount in the near future, or maybe if anything, do you think we'll see a growth in AppSec?
I am predicting that we'll be steady state in AppSec, and I think that's where the problem is. I don't think we're worried that people will lose their jobs and everything will go with AI. I think the problem is your organization is doubling the amount of code you will generate in the next 12 months with these coding assistants, knowing very well the quality will deteriorate, more security problems will get introduced. 62% of code generated by AI has security issues. So the data is pretty clear, but unfortunately, you're not going to double, triple your headcount in application security. You're still going to be running a 200 devs to one AppSec engineer type of ratio, in which case, what you really need to do is think about how you're going to embrace AI within application security teams to solve the things you may have traditionally done manually, whether it was triage, whether it was investigations, whether it was code reviews and design reviews, whether it was threat modeling. All of that needs to be automated at AI scale.
Yeah, so we're coming up on time here. So I think a lot of this really hinges on communication, right? Because I think that there's a lot of problems here that are, some of these problems are very familiar, like too much noise, we have too many tools, nothing is getting fixed in time, I have to meet compliance standards, and a lot of these things are getting exacerbated by AI. But at the same time, there's a mandate from the CEO, from the board, to roll out AI in all of its forms. And I think every department in every company almost has to justify itself in how am I helping manifest that productivity? How am I helping roll this out? And there is an interesting opportunity here where we're hearing more security leaders talk about application security as an enabler for that. So you've been spending a lot of time with application security leaders and CISOs over your whole career, but the past few months very specifically. If you could give them some advice on how can application security leaders explain how their department, their teams can be an enabler for the rollout of AI-generated code, how would you help them explain that to a business owner, to like a business-oriented CISO?
I think one is a mindset shift that's required in our approach as security practitioners is, don't go in there talking about why you cannot use coding assistants. Talk about how you can, but with the right guardrails. So I think one is just the narrative has to shift. You don't want to be the department of no, because you will get railroaded on AI initiatives. The second piece is educate yourself on risk. There's a lot of great academic papers. There's papers by Meta, a lot of good data on the classes of security issues and risks and metrics. Bring metrics and data into the conversation, right? Don't be a conversation about emotions and feelings. Build it around data. And the third thing is, bring solutions to the table. So the solutions can be the right set of MCP servers to do pair programming with your coding assistants. The solutions could be how you're going to automate security code reviews. The solutions could be other things. But really come in with the mindset of, I know this is happening and I know I need to support it. Now let's just put the guardrails such that we don't make blatant errors and we can keep scaling the work.
Yeah, and I think that is true for pretty much every department in every company, right? Even in worlds like content marketing and product marketing, it is known at this point that if you do not embrace these tools in some way or another, your competitors will outperform you because they will ship more than you faster, right? And then the intensity becomes almost table stakes at that point. And then it becomes a question of, okay, what can I do in order to help facilitate that in a way that still meets our quality standards, in a way that still meets our security standards with no mistakes. And there's so many similarities, I think, between using AI for code and using AI for writing that is really similar. Andrew, any parting words from you before we wrap up?
No, I think that's a great conclusion. I guess I'd kind of leave you with maybe one last thought. There's a lot of research that basically all the vulnerabilities in AI generated code are the same ones that happen at the same rates in open source. And so in some ways, this seems like a novel problem, but in other ways, it's really not, right? We've always needed to shift security earlier and but not just shift the noise earlier, but give the right context at the right time to developers. And now the variation is it's developers and agents. And so the technologies are a little bit different, but the solution is always the same, right? Give the right context at the right time to help solve issues earlier in the software development pipeline.
Yeah, what is old is new again. Next
Yep.
time, I would like for us to dig a little bit deeper into how all of this actually integrates into developer workflows. How do the MCPs and all of these things, how do they meet the developers actually live? So we'll see. We might pull in some more friends for that. Varun, Andrew, thank you so much. This has been great. We're gonna sign off now, and then I'm gonna very carefully use a lot of AI tools to process everything that we just talked about today. All right, thanks, guys.